Hello everyone, welcome to Prosarium.net. Prosarium.net is an initiative to create positive representation for African women in games. We're doing this by documenting African women and their roles in the industry, from hobbyists to game developers to esports professionals and more. Be a part of this initiative by supporting us on Patreon. And now, let's get to today's video. Hey everyone, we're back with another interview with a wonderful woman in games. We have Natalie from Cape Town. Natalie, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Natalie Cuthbert. I'm co-founder and CTO of a fintech startup called Stitch. And for about 8 years now, I've also sort of been a passionate hobbyist developer and a member of a collective called Super Friendship Arcade, which is trying to sort of make punk games much more accessible to the general public. Yeah, also sort of enjoy very much sort of exploring the art side of game development and sort of trying to push the boundaries of sort of interesting aesthetics.
Oh my gosh, you do a lot of stuff. You explore a lot of stuff, which is really cool. And yeah, since we've been in a pandemic for the last how many months and years, whatever, how have you been? How have you been? How have you been coping with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been quite a crazy 2 years, to be honest. A lot has happened. I mean, I think it was for example, our startup only really started a few months before the pandemic really got underway. So like, sort of as we started hiring people, having to like, shift into that was kind of a bit of a challenge. I think it's also just very much changed the way business and work is conducted. But yeah, and I guess on the more personal side, yeah, I think at least for me, it kind of gave me much more space for sort of introspection, because there was just a lot less stuff going on. And yeah, in October last year, I came out to sort of myself as trans. And I think that started a journey that's still going on now today, of, sort of reflecting on, sort of who I am as a person. And yeah, I suppose another big realization that I had, a few months ago was that I was on the spectrum and then sort of started doing that process of, getting diagnosed with autism, which, yeah, I think having that knowledge and stuff, I think is something I'm still working on, but I think, yeah, knowing yourself allows you to just be kinder to yourself, kinder to everyone else. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, interesting year.
Yeah, it's been a nice time to think about ourselves. So yeah, glad you had so many
Yeah.
revelations during that time, during the pandemic. Yeah, and since you're involved in games, or you like the art side of games, so you're obviously a creative person. So, when did you start making games, and can you tell us more about your creativity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of a bit of a wandering journey. I think it sort of was, I mean, I've always been interested in sort of games, as a child as well. But I think it was what kind of, what developed my sort of tastes and things, I think was that what was constraints, I guess. For example, didn't have much, like was fortunate enough to be able to use like, sort of my father's work computer, but like didn't have access to, sort of many commercial video games or, sort of internet even that, could allow you to download these larger, sort of files. So the kinds of experiences that I played were generally like much shorter, a little bit more out there because of that. A lot less commercial, more experimental. And yeah, I mean, I guess sort of I've always been interested in creation and, I've had a lifelong fascination with digital art, with design, with writing. I think that's something in my childhood that I'd had the privilege of kind of exploring, all of those things. Yeah, and I think, and like I don't know, I suppose I had a childhood that kind of did facilitate that creativity, which was great. Yeah, but I really only got into games, game making itself when I sort of went to university. And I think it, sort of gave you a little bit more time and space to explore some of that, side of things. So yeah, one of the first games I actually made was for an assignment, where we were kind of asked to recreate, the classic game Minesweeper, and I ended up taking it a little bit too far, and making a, top-down, third-person Minesweeper game, with a little Minesweeper person who was like could run around the minefield and like actually scan for mines. Yeah. Um, and there, I think quite soon after that, started getting involved with, game jamming. Sort of the global game jam was, sort of one of my first experiences with, sort of the game development community. And shortly after that, I was also sort of where I got involved with Super Friendship Arcade, which I think just exposed me to sort of a wonderful group of people, doing some awesome things. And yeah, kind of been making random things here and there ever since.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a nice journey. And I actually wanted to jump in on the constraints part because yeah, all of us had really bad internet when we were young. I remember,
Yeah.
and not having access to the greatest games. But I also remember, I don't know if you also had this experience, but demo discs where they would have discs with
Yes.
demos. Yeah, you did too. Yes, that's where I played
Yeah, I mean,
most
I
of my
think,
games.
yeah, what was fun was at least the ones that we had here is that it wasn't just that they included games, they also sort of included, sort of animation and like, um, other kinds of media as well, which, was quite cool, sort of. I think I've always been very influenced by, web animation, as well. Something that I love. It's something I still, sort of watch quite a lot of these like, sort of animated shorts and things. Yeah. The,
Oh, good time. That sounds like a good time, like really good times, exploring your
yeah.
creativity. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
so, oh, has the pandemic opened you up to any new creative experiences? Like, have you worked on any games, or projects?
Yeah, so then I guess sort of it's been a bit of a mad time, but, um yeah, one of the things that actually managed to get out the door, during COVID was a game called Search Questival, which I, developed with my, frequent collaborator Terry Khan, which was a game commissioned by, a actual real life music festival called Search Festival, which, it is a New Year's Eve party that happens, and kind of is a celebration of, electronic music. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic last year, they had to cancel the event. And what they wanted to do, I suppose, is sort of, create something for the like, sort of regular attendees to sort of, remember that year by, even if they couldn't, necessarily have the full experience. So yeah, we kind of did a fair amount of work to sort of capture that, sort of liminal feeling of a music festival. And yeah, it was really fun. I mean, it was quite a interesting challenge to do that. because we also had to, sort of find ways to put the music front and center as well. So we kind of had, sort of stage areas where we had to kind of weave that into the gameplay, and narrative. Yeah, that was a fun challenge. Yeah. And then, yeah, I guess sort of otherwise haven't really been, working on releasing anything major, but I have been sort of continuing to explore sort of some alternative, styles and sort of means of doing 3D animation as well. I've been quite interested with claymation, and for the last while, I've been sort of trying to build up tooling to sort of create that feeling in games themselves.
Sounds like a lot. You did a lot. You've done a lot during the pandemic, like lots of cool
Yeah, I
stuff.
mean, it's been two
Oh yeah, it's been
horrible
2 years.
years. Yeah, it has been. Yeah, I mean, I think it's been challenging as well, trying to try and get a balance, because I mean, I've also got a day job as well. I mean, I think that's something I struggle with, if I'm being very honest, is finding a balance in life, trying to sort of get to a healthy place where you're not burning yourself out. I think that's something that I'm actually struggling with at the moment.
I know what you mean. I struggle with
Yeah, I mean,
balance too.
I think for so many of us, I guess, sort of, if you're using games as a form of self-expression or creativity, I think it's a valuable outlet. But I think it, if you don't have that available just because you don't have the energy for it, I think that can be, put you in quite a, like, an unhealthy space where, you don't have any of that outlet. And I think trying to, sort of separate your, like, self-identity and your mental health from creation and production and so on, I think is really important. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah. Which is, yeah, I mean, I'm probably being a massive hypocrite here, because it's something I still, I think, am working through, is, yeah, trying to first find ways to exist as, sort of Natalie the human, rather than Natalie the machine that makes things. Yeah.
So you'll get there, but no, still I'm surprised you're doing so much, and I didn't even know you were doing it all, like balancing a day job as well. Like that's a lot of stuff, but it's awesome that you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you mentioned Search Festival, I was actually thinking about how we're kind of opening up for conferences and physical events now. So what are you looking forward to in that space? What are you looking forward to in in-person communities and conferences and events?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the smaller things is that, there there's sort of a local community, a branch of Make Games SA, that, sort of before the pandemic, would do sort of monthly meetups and things. And I think that was a, sort of nice way to engage with the community on a regular basis. Obviously, game jams have also sort of been a big thing where, um, I don't know, at least I personally find, sort of remote jamming a lot more challenging. It's sort of, I think, trying to put something together in a very short space of time and not having the sort of immediacy of just being able to tap someone on the shoulder makes it much harder. And I think it also makes it those kind of events, which I think is an important part of having game jams, is the accessibility. Um, sort of, if you don't have the, like, human connection of, sort of being able to ask someone who has enough experience to act as a mentor, questions in those kind of spaces, I think it can just, doing game jams as a newcomer can be just really daunting as well. And then, yeah, I guess the final thing that I'm really will be excited about once sort of we start easing out and sort of vaccination rates climb is Super Friendship Arcade. Sort of as I mentioned earlier, it's a kind of like collective that aims to sort of bring the weird, the wild, the queer, the punk, to the sort of fore in at least the South Africa, like local community. And one of the main ways that we have been doing that is by holding sort of parties, sort of with live music. They're often in quite grungy places, and what we do there is then we sort of create. We'll have like sort of jams and create custom controllers, decorations and things, and set up just for an evening like arcade stations that people can come and play and engage with, watch, cheer. And I think what's nice about that kind of thing is it brings in people who would never usually go into those kind of spaces and exposes them to new things. For example, I don't know if you've heard of the free lives game Genital Jousting. Yeah. So that one was sort of a narrative about like kind of toxic masculinity, but the actual sort of core gameplay was sort of it started off as essentially like kind of a joke, but like bringing it back into that like kind of party space sort of was quite interesting because a lot of people there were sort of cisgender and like kind of it was very strange, but I think challenging people in that way can be quite interesting.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I remember, I remember seeing it for the first time and I was taken aback a bit, but then I was like, okay, no, it's actually fun.
Yeah, and I think what's also nice is it's sort of it's like we kind of also make our own games as well as sort of curating other interesting games from kind of around the world there. I think it's always been kind of interesting the link between Amaze and Super Friendship Arcade as well. I think I don't know if your listeners all have been aware of Amaze, but it's sort of a very much art house, non-capitalist games festival that started in Berlin. I think it's been going about 10 years now. And yeah, for a while they were sort of doing events in Joburg as well. And I think, yeah, at least for me, that and along with the kind of like Playtopia, I think for whatever reason has been like kind of like quite important to like my personal journey, not just in games, but just in like life. I don't know. It feels like those kind of spaces just allow you to mix with, sort of very different people and like realize things about yourself in the process.
They are great experiences. Yeah, no, you totally get you. Yeah. And yeah, if you've never heard of Amaze or Super Friendship Arcade, please look them up. Really, really fun stuff. Really fun stuff. Yeah. So the last thing I would like to talk about is your experience with Stitch and investment in Africa. Like totally, like kind of parallel or off topic a bit, but super interested in it. So yeah, what have your experiences been recently?
Yeah, so maybe it'll be helpful to just to like talk about what we're doing as a company and what we're trying to sort of achieve and sort of how things kind of, I guess, changed over time as well, because I think that is quite interesting and potentially quite relevant. So about 2 years ago, I kind of happened to bump into someone I'd used to work with, Kian Play, and he kind of approached me to ask if I wanted to join the startup that was aiming to sort of make building fintech companies in Africa a lot easier. Because I think it's, if you look at, sort of the damage that, sort of colonialism and so on has done, sort of tearing, territories apart and stuff, the, sort of the ramifications of that, sort of continue to this day, sort of there are just so many, like there's over 50 African countries and they're like the laws and stuff in each, sort of jurisdiction are just so different. And I think from our experiences at other companies, it's sort of, so trying to build something that can scale across a continent is really hard because of that. And we wanted to try and like build services and things for other companies that would make that much easier. Yeah, and I think it's been a very interesting journey so far. And I think what's been quite surprising is sort of how the actual sort of underlying ecosystem has changed, even in the 2 years that we started building it. It's just for whatever reason, sort of investors have started taking Africa a lot more seriously. We started just seeing and sort of talking to investment firms that sort of have never touched Africa, and sort of a few years ago when prodded with even with a stick or something. Yeah, I think people are just taking the continent a lot more seriously, which means that there is more sort of funding available, at least for the kind of company that we're building. And I think probably it is a bit of a leading indicator because I'd imagine, I mean, this is just a theory, but I'd imagine kind of investment in some ways follows like a kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of a thing where you have, sort of the base infrastructure or functionality or, the bread and butter stuff. And as the space becomes more viable for more types of companies, then you can start building, sort of more abstract things, I guess, such as like games. Yeah, what's also sort of interesting as well is if you look at other startup trends, there are companies now coming out of it, Africa, which aren't just catering to sort of the African market, they're also catering to the rest of the world. Sort of, I think it's really awesome to see like that people's imaginations are kind of extending beyond, sort of the borders of our continent. And yeah, I mean, an example of that is like Chipper Cash, which, they've just recently launched in America. So like African company is now sort of operating in the US. Other companies are like, I don't know if you've heard of Over. They're like a photo editing application, which got pretty popular. But yeah, they were building in South Africa, but, sort of their audience was the world. And I think games are sort of similar, in that, to be honest, if you are only trying to sell to one market, you're kind of missing out on the rest. Like there's efficiencies and like scale there. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, this is a bit of a ramble, but yeah, like I think there's just exciting stuff happening, and I think there is a lot of reason to be, sort of excited about the future here. I think a lot of the time you hear a huge amount of doom and gloom, but I think there is also green shoots, and like for people who are willing to, sort of commit to sort of building a beautiful place we share. It's, yeah, I think it can be rewarding. I mean, it's probably easier, if you had to do stuff elsewhere, but I mean, yeah, I think it can be rewarding.
Oh, it is.
I don't know.
I'm very hopeful. You're bringing us a lot of hope, which I like. Good positive vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. By the way, I'm totally aware that we're losing daylight. So this has been an awesome chat. Before we end, is there anything you want to say, like a last thing you want to say?
No, I mean, I think it's just been awesome seeing how you've been trying to, put the focus on, sort of female African game developers. I think it's sort of having really good examples of people is, sort of awesome. Yeah, hopefully can have a whole bunch more of these.
Yeah, really
Yeah, I don't
excited.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us in this, and thank you for all the great things you said. You gave us a lot of wisdom. So we have to say bye now. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Bye,
Cool.
Natalie.